This episode is brought to you by United Airlines. When you want to make the most of your vacation, book with United. They're an airline that cares about your travels as much as you do. United is transforming the flying experience with Bluetooth connectivity, screens, power at every seat, and bigger overhead bins to help fit everyone's bag. And with their app, you can skip the bag check line, get live updates, and more. Change the way you fly. Book your next trip today at united.com.
We
are
Cultivate.
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 We are Cultivate.
Hello and welcome to Yield Crime, where we discuss the funny, strange, and obscure crimes of yesteryear. I'm your host, Lindsay Valenti, and with me is my sister and co-host, Maddie Stengel.
Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
It's going.
Yeah.
Life has been interesting since we last recorded, but it's fine. It's all good.
Yeah, it's fine.
I have two quick things I'm going to announce at the top. So we still have that sale going on at our TeePublic shop where you can get 35% off November 6th through the 24th. And second bit of news is ASA Collective, which we are part of, has since joined forces with Culture Media to launch the Culture Podcast Network, which we are now a part of.
Okay.
So that doesn't mean much is changing. It just means that we can potentially gain more ad revenue. So
I'll take that.
Nothing outwardly is changing. We are just now part of what they say on their website is a content-first podcast network focused on building strong partnerships between creator and advertisers.
Nice.
Their goal is to offer collaboration opportunities that drive results and meaningful revenue.
Cool.
So yeah. But enough about that. Let's talk about what we're going to be talking about this week.
Yeah, what are we going to be talking about?
We are going to be discussing Thomas Morton.
I just think of salt. That can't be right.
Yeah. No.
It's not like he's like a murderer?
No, this is Indigenous people adjacent.
Okay.
So So it's still on theme.
Okay.
All right. Information was pulled from the following sources: a 2023 Smithsonian Magazine article by Colleen Connolly, 2023 SOAM's Heritage Area article, 2020 The Public Domain Review article by Ed Simon, 2020 World History Encyclopedia article by Joshua J. Mark, 2019 Atlas Obscura article by Matthew Taub, 1955 American Heritage article by Carlton Beals, Find a Grave, Marymount Quincy website, the New York Public Library, and 4 Wikipedia links.
All right.
And links to all of these articles will be included in the show notes. We wouldn't be here without support from listeners like you. If you're interested in supporting us financially, you can leave a one-time or monthly donation over on Buy Me a Coffee or our Venmo page. Links are in the show notes. And we make a point of reaching out to send you a thank you note and stickers to show our appreciation.
Want to show your support in a more concrete way? Pick up some Yield Crime merch over at our TeePublic shop. We shout out whenever there is a sale each month, and we work to make sure we're creating new designs and changing it up whenever possible. And hey, thanks for listening.
Now, not a ton is known about the early life of Thomas Morton.
Okay. I feel like that rings true for the majority of our subjects.
For the most part, yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know where this guy came from.
1900 and earlier. Good luck.
Yeah. So we know he was born sometime in 1579 into an upper class family in England, and he was an Anglican lawyer by trade.
Oh, dang. Okay.
We know that on November 6th, 1621, he married Alice Miller in Tilehurst, Berkshire. I couldn't find much of anything about Alice.
Oh, that checks out.
Yeah, because she's a woman. We don't know anything about her. We do know that she was a wealthy widow prior to her marriage to Thomas.
Oh.
It's unclear how or when her previous husband, George, passed, but we do know that George's son, whose name I don't know, took Thomas to court over his father's estate because he was like, I don't want you getting my dad's money.
I mean, justifiable. The replacement guy getting money, I can see how you would try to not make that happen.
Yeah. Making sure your stepdad doesn't get your money. Yeah.
Yeah, especially if they're both really wealthy, because the pettiness, I feel like the pettiness increases with the more money you have.
It was during this ongoing court battle that Thomas befriended merchant and investor Sir Ferdinando, I'm going to say Georges, or it's spelled Gorges. Gorgeous? I'm going to say gorgeous. That makes him sound fancy.
Or Gorgas.
Or Gorgas, who would later found Maine, like the state of Maine.
Oh, dang. Okay. Casual.
Yeah.
Just
cash.
hanging out with the guy that established Maine.
Yeah. Casual.
And that guy, too. Like, this is mine now. I'm going to call it Maine.
Yeah. So Thomas's life starts to gain more traction when he travels from Clifford's Inn, London, to Massachusetts Bay in 1622 as part of a contingent that was sent over by Thomas Weston, although he was officially employed by Ferdinando.
Okay.
So I'll kind of like explain a little bit. So Thomas Weston was a London merchant who traded with other merchants in the Netherlands.
Okay.
And when he and his associates were ordered to cease trading with them, he left England and traveled to Leyden, Holland, where his agent had married a Puritan woman that was part of a group of separatists hoping to travel to America. Now, I think you have an idea of where this is going based off the word Puritan.
Yeah, really not great.
So Thomas Weston helped fund the Puritans' voyage aboard the Mayflower in 1620. So 2 years before Thomas makes his voyage.
So now they have like an infomercials worth of like, come to America, we have this.
Yeah. So Thomas Morton, who was about as polar opposite as one can be from a Puritan, arrived in June of 1622 as part of a 3-month reconnaissance mission for Ferdinando, who had hired him.
So he's an undercover Puritan?
Yeah, kind of. Like that, he's like, go check out the New World and report back. Let me know how it is.
He just immediately goes back. It's terrible. I hate it. Why did you do this to me?
So Thomas returned to England not long after, so in 1632, due to his dissatisfaction with the rigid governance of the Puritans, which surprised no one. Because, of course, they're the Puritans. They weren't exactly known for their jolly disposition.
They escaped tyrannical rule just to become even more tyrannical themselves.
Yep. So Thomas returned the following year aboard the ship Unity with associate Captain Richard Wollaston to establish his own colony.
He's like, I want my own Maine.
Now, Captain Richard, who is separate from Ferdinando, I don't know what happened with Ferdinando, but Captain Richard was also as polar opposite of a Puritan as you can get, considering he was a notorious pirate.
Nice.
Mount Wollaston, which was located near present-day Quincy, Massachusetts, was founded and named by Richard, who brought with him 30 proprietors and several indentured servants.
Great. He's like, listen, I'm too big and too important to make this work. So let's just kidnap some people that owe us, and they'll make it for us.
Yep. So shortly after the founding of Mount Wollaston, an uprising was levied against Richard's successor, a man named Mr. Fitcher, in 1626. So Mount Wollaston was established in 1624.
Not even 2 years later.
Yeah.
They were like, listen.
An uprising was started when Thomas discovered that his friend, who had passed away that same year, was selling the indentured servants of the settlers of his new colony into slavery in Jamestown in Virginia.
So when he was like, so when I die, all of you are now slaves for Jamestown. Peace.
Yeah, like prior to him passing away, he was selling people to the colonists in Jamestown to be their slaves.
I mean, he kind of just sounds like somebody who would do that.
I mean, he was a pirate. His morals are questionable at best. So
yeah, he's kind of all of the extremes at once. So why not throw that in?
Now, Thomas was viewed as a raconteur, a libertine, a rake, which we love a rake here on the podcast.
I mean, to a point, yeah.
Or a rogue. One could call him a rogue.
Yeah.
And a pseudo-pagan for envisioning and building a society that valued art and poetry over industry and labor.
Okay.
He's also a bit of a dandy. We'll just say that.
I think he used pagan very loosely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If it was more on community and like not slavery, then yes.
So his goal, Thomas's goal, was to live in intercultural harmony with the indigenous people of the New World, as opposed to the sort of like white supremacy-esque leanings of the Puritans, who were like, y'all are savages, we own this land, GTFO. So
we can't understand you, so we're just gonna barrel over you.
Yeah. In his book, The Barbarous Years, author Bernard Balin described Thomas as, quote, one of the strangest, most flamboyant, and most belligerently impious people ever to wander into the coastal scene, end quote. A, quote, nature lover, pleasure seeker, and a Rabelaisian celebrant of secular rights, end quote. That is fancy.
He really hated the Puritans, and we're just like, listen, we can do this better.
Yes. Upon the expulsion of Mr. Fitcher, who had taken over for Captain Richard, Captain Dick, I just put that together, Thomas took over leadership as mine host. So not the leader, mine host. And he renamed the colony Mount Mare, or Marymount. Marymount was to be a utopia in opposition to Plymouth and the Massachusetts Bay Colony, focusing on the unique emotion known as joy.
Yeah, that's not allowed.
No.
Anywhere near any of this.
No.
No, you can't just seek joy wherever you go.
The renaming of the colony was to be marked on May 1st, 1627, with a party.
May Day celebration?
Yep.
Is this why he's such a pagan?
So at this point, the Plymouth colony had started to take notice of the Marymount colony and their unique way of life.
They're too happy. We need to ruin it.
Yeah. So in the spring of 1621, for context, so like 6 years prior, the colony at Plymouth, under Governor William Bradford, had established a treaty with the Wampanoag Confederacy under the leadership of Chief Massasoit, which we had discussed a year or two ago.
Right.
Anyway, so like they have their thing going on, and now here's the thing going on at Marymount. So the revels and merriment that took place at Marymount were reminiscent of Merry England, which is a sort of utopia that was first introduced in the Middle Ages based on the principles of a more pastoral way of life. Very ye old hippies.
Yeah.
So these included cultural symbols such as a thatched cottage, country inns, Sunday roasts, and festive gatherings. Gatherings could include such activities as pageants, processions, games, decadent desserts, and drinks.
This really does sound so nice and has no place in this part of history.
No.
Of course this is going to get snuffed out immediately. Are you kidding?
Yeah. So those who practiced
Mhm.
enjoyed a festive calendar that had around 50 holy days for seasonal and communal gatherings.
That's so cute.
And although many of them included drinking to excess, singing, frivolity, and a certain amount of mayhem, some
Mhm.
included entertainment like minstrels, jugglers,
Yeah.
dancers, actors, and such as an event that was soon to take place in Marymount, maypoles.
Mhm.
May Day maypoles. Settlers, as well as the indigenous peoples of the area, which included the Massachusetts and Algonquin, were invited to join in the festivities, as there was, quote, brewed a barrel of excellent beer and provided a case of bottles to be spent with other good cheer for all comers of that day, end quote. So they're like, we're going to celebrate all the people that are around here, how
Yeah.
awesome it is here.
It's just
Come
really
on
nice.
over.
We're just going to hang out.
Yeah, come meet your neighbors, guys. Like,
The old national night out.
right? And May Day festivities would become a yearly tradition that was emerging of Algonquin and Celtic traditions, which their Puritan neighbors were not fans of, like,
Oh, I bet.
at all.
Especially since it would be something where the white people had a tradition similar to, so it
To the native
obviously,
peoples, yeah.
so it obviously must be the devil's work, because how else would they be so similar?
Yeah.
Ugh. I hate Puritans so much.
So the following year in 1628, the members of Marymount, or the settlers of Marymount, raised a huge maypole that was a, quote, goodly pine tree of 80 feet long, or 24
Oh my
meters,
God.
with a pair of buck's horns nailed on somewhat near unto the top of it, where it stood as a fair sea mark for directions on how to find the way, end quote.
Yeah, I bet you could definitely see that.
And it was erected in the center of the town, so the town square. William Bradford, who led the Plymouth colony, Governor Bradford,
So that went, oh!
he saw Thomas's revels and their partakers as, quote, consorts dancing and frisking together like so many fairies or furries, rather and worse practices of the mad bacchanalians, end quote.
Oh, not the Bacchanalians. Oh no.
Yeah. Thomas encouraged his English compatriots to forge relationships with their indigenous neighbors, becoming partners with them, trading guns for beaver pelts, which will become a point of contention later. And he also encouraged marriage between the English settlers and the natives, which was a horrifying idea to his Puritan neighbors.
Oh man. Yeah, I bet they didn't even think it was possible initially.
Yeah. They couldn't fathom the idea of treating the indigenous people as
People.
equals without some form of contract. Like,
Yeah.
we have to have something in writing that shows that we're better than them.
Puritans invent the prenup.
Because of Thomas Morton, yeah.
Because of Thomas Morton.
So William Bradford, once again, had quite a few things to say about Thomas and Marymount. And this is kind of long, but I'm going to you just need to listen.
I just have to put this in here. It really sounds like Thomas was the inventor of modern day salt, because these people are so salty. Oh my God. He is ruining their lives.
He is.
Just by existing.
Oh, man. It gets even better.
Oh, man.
So William Bradford said, quote, they then fell to utter licentiousness and led a dissolute and profane life. Morton became lord of misrule and maintained, as it were, a school of atheism. As soon as they acquired some means by trading with the Indians, they spent it in drinking wine and strong drinks to great excess, as some reported 10 pounds worth in a morning. They set up a maypole, drinking and dancing about it for several days at a time, inviting the Indian women for their consorts, dancing and frisking together like so many fairies, or furries rather, to say nothing of worse practices. It was as if they had revived the celebrated feasts of the Roman goddess Flora, or the beastly practices of the mad Bacchanalians. Morton, to show his poetry, composed sundry verses and rhymes, some tending to lasciviousness, and others to the detraction and scandal of some persons, affixing them to his idol, or idol maypole. He had it written as
Oh,
like
yeah,
IDLE and idol. Idolatry, oh God.
Yeah, now they're worshiping a pole.
Yep.
This is how it starts.
That's how it starts. They changed the name of the place, and instead of calling it Mount Wollaston, they called it Merrymount, as if this jollity would last forever, in order to maintain this riotous prodigality and excess. Morton, hearing what profit the French and the fishermen had made by trading guns, powder, and shot to the Indians, began to practice it hereabouts, teaching them how to use them. Having instructed them, he employed some of them to hunt and fowl for him, until they became far more able than the English, owing to their swiftness on foot and nimbleness of body, being quick-sighted and knowing the haunts of all sorts of game, with the result that when they saw what execution a gun would do, and the advantage of it, they were mad for them and would pay any price for them, thinking their bows and arrows but baubles in comparison. End quote.
Yeah, maybe. And who cares? Yeah, if I was introduced to a new place and there were a bunch of people who did not look like me, and the majority of them were super hostile and took my stuff and tried to kill me or enslave me, and then here's this other guy who's like, no dude, this is how you can have this is how it works. You best believe I'm taking all of that in. Are you kidding? Yeah, dude, that's exactly.
Yeah. You can tell who the more fun neighbor would be to hang out with.
Yeah. Wow.
And Thomas didn't agree with William's assessment, especially the idea that they were a colony of debauchers.
Right. Could you imagine even attempting to party for days at a time like that? Especially then. Especially then when I don't know, breathing air can give you a stomach virus.
Yeah.
You get dysentery from just existing. So yeah, you're not gonna. I highly doubt the partying was really like that, truly.
Yeah.
And even if it was, I'm sure it was very fleeting.
So the only sort of real celebration the colony took part in was May Day. And Thomas stated, quote, after renaming the colony Merrymount and being resolved to have the new name confirmed for a memorial to after ages, the inhabitants did devise amongst themselves to have it performed in a solemn manner, with revels and merriment, after the old English custom, prepared to set up a maypole upon the festive day of May Day, and therefore brewed a barrel of excellent beer, and provided a case of bottles to be spent with other good cheer for all comers that day. And because they would have it in a complete form, they had prepared a song fitting to the time and present occasion. And upon May Day, they brought the maypole to the place appointed, with drums, guns, pistols, and other fitting instruments for that purpose, and there erected it with the help of savages that came thither of purpose to see the manner of our revels. A goodly pine tree of 80 foot long was reared up, with a pair of buck's horns nailed on somewhat near unto the top of it, where it stood as a fair sea mark for directions, how to find out the way to mine host of Maury Mount. End quote.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds lovely, and for the indigenous people too. Why wouldn't you want to go hang out? And these people finally invited you to something positive.
Yeah,
that the white people did. Of course you're gonna go, especially if you're not so pessimistic and fatalistic like the Puritans.
Yeah,
and probably other indigenous tribes too. I'm sure they had their own extremists as well during this time.
Yeah. So William, who you probably guessed wasn't Thomas's biggest fan, wrote to him demanding that he cease selling arms to the natives.
Stop it.
And in response to this, Thomas flat out refused, stating that there was no law against doing so.
Yeah, and he's like, and also you're not the boss of me, so go away.
Well, and fun fact, remember how Thomas was a lawyer?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he'd be the worst person to argue with, especially when it came to law.
He was right in this, as there was only a proclamation against it that had been signed by King James I. But since he had died in 1625, the power behind his proclamation, which had never been put into law, died along with him, which meant he could sell guns to whoever the hell he wanted to because there was literally no law or proclamation against it.
Yeah. Kind of seems like this Thomas is the real founder of freedom.
I mean,
right now.
really.
I mean, he's doing a real good job. Why haven't I heard more about this?
Yeah. So after refusing to listen to reason, in 1628, Governor Bradford sent a commander from Plymouth named Miles Standish to march a garrison into Marymount to take care of the quote-unquote Lord of Misrule.
Uh-oh.
Now, Thomas agreed to surrender on the condition that no one, including himself, be harmed.
Yeah,
And once this had been agreed upon, Thomas left the safety of his home only to be attacked, bound, and led away in chains.
Yeah. Dude. Like,
yeah. He's an optimist.
He is, but he was also a contemporary to a guy who just would sell people willy-nilly in the same town. So, like, he's not an idiot. He should have known better.
So Thomas was tried in Plymouth for providing guns to the natives, then marooned on the Isle of Shoals off the coast of Maine without any provisions or means to provide for himself.
They didn't give him his 3 things?
Nope.
What a terrible game. This story is actually now why we let you have 3 things in your fantasy if you're stranded on an island. It's all thanks to him.
So Thomas only survived thanks to the help of his friends, the indigenous people, who brought him food and cared for him until he was able to board a fishing ship that was bound for England.
Oh, they were like, hey, it's the white guy we like.
They were like, bro,
we're gonna help
you throw the best parties. We're going to take care of you. We got this.
Where have you been, man? I have so much leftovers.
Upon his return to England, Thomas sued the Massachusetts Bay Company in an effort to revoke their charter for settlement.
Dang.
And Thomas returned to Marymount the following year in 1629. He was arrested again, this time by Puritan John Endicott, who entered Marymount, had the maypole chopped down, burned down Thomas's house, and then razed the rest of the settlement to the ground.
Yeah.
He was like, you guys can't have fun. Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah. Well, and you sued him. Like, I'm sorry, but you can't expect civility in an uncivil environment created by people who are craving civility.
In 1630, when Governor Winthrop arrived in the area of present-day Boston with 900 more Puritans.
Ugh. God, could you imagine? I bet everything was just gray.
Ugh, yeah.
They just had a cloud follow them around.
So, Governor Winthrop aided in the arrest and second deportation of Thomas, and Marymount, since it had been burned to the ground, dissolved after having been a colony for just 6 years. So it was kind of a failed colony. Upon his return to England, Thomas was briefly imprisoned at Exeter's jail, but was later released without charges.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you going to do against him?
Well, and I'm sorry too, but if a lot of his crimes were more so against the Puritans and less so the money, like the Massachusetts Bay Colony, he would get let off because England hated the Puritans more than they hated anybody. So after the people with money are satisfied, it's fine.
Care. In 1633, Thomas wrote and attempted to publish the first edition of his book called The New English Canon, that was part personal revelations and part educational body of work. It wasn't until 4 years later in 1637 that Thomas finally published his book in Amsterdam, although some people say it was probably actually published in London, but they did it under the name of Amsterdam to cover their tracks. So in it, it noted the life of the Algonquin, the topography of Massachusetts, the husbandry and agriculture of the New World, the value of religious harmony and tolerance, and lots of anti-Puritan rhetoric.
I bet it was essentially his diary of like,
Yeah.
they
Personal
came and bothered
grievances.
us again. I hate them so much. And then he was like, and then we had a party, and then they came back, and I hate them so much.
Yeah. So one thing to remember about this body of work is that it was written 10 years after Thomas was exiled from the Americas. And England itself was on the cusp of civil war between the Anglicans and the Puritans.
Mhm.
And many viewed the body of work as a bit of propaganda to get the charter of the Massachusetts Bay Colony revoked, painting the Puritans as anti-Anglican.
Mm.
His ploy, however, failed. So in his 3-part book, Thomas showcased the natural beauty of the New World, which was similar to the views of the Spanish who settled in South America and the English colonists who settled in Virginia, that were like, this place is gorgeous, not check out all these savages that we need to kill and get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
Like, this place is beautiful. Thomas's fellow New Englanders viewed Massachusetts as a barren, inhospitable wasteland, while Thomas noted in his book that it included, quote, goodly groves of trees, dainty fine round rising hillocks, delicate fair large plains, sweet crystal fountains, and clear running streams, end quote.
Again, there wasn't enough disease or dead bodies in the water, so they had to make their own dead bodies so that they wouldn't be homesick when drinking clean water and breathing clean air.
Yep.
They needed more toxins.
Thomas noted the colonies as, quote, nature's masterpiece, her chiefest magazine of all, where lives her store. In this land be not rich, then is the whole world poor, end quote. Very prose.
Mm-hmm.
So this book was outlawed in the colonies shortly after its publication.
Yeah, because it's very anti-Puritan. So, of course, yeah.
But it also made it the first book banned in the New World.
That's amazing. I'm sure he really loved that title.
I'm sure he did. So in it, he chastises the Puritans for their treatment of the indigenous people and their hypocrisy. In a poem, he writes, quote, what? Is their zeal for blood like Cirrus' thirst? Will they be overhead and ears accursed? A cruel way to found a church on? No, 'tis not their zeal, but fury blinds them so, end quote.
Yeah.
So Thomas returned to New England on board the Hopewell when it landed in Boston on December 10th, 1643, where he was promptly jailed again.
Thomas.
He just...
Stop.
He languished in jail for almost a year, then was released without trial, but was given a 100-pound fine. And I couldn't figure out what the conversion was for that because they didn't tabulate that far back.
And like with what money? He was in jail for a year.
Yeah. And it's likely he was released not only due to his poor health, but also the fact that there was no hard evidence that he was a royalist agitator as the English Civil War was taking place at the time that he was arrested.
Yeah. I mean, you can't say he wrote it. You can't say he did like any of it.
Yeah.
And as a litigator, he will make sure you know.
Yeah, he'll plead his case.
I'm sure they got rid of him because they were annoyed more than anything else.
They're like, God, this guy. Thomas passed away in present-day York, Maine in 1647 at the age of 68.
Wow. He lived really long, especially during that time. That would have been like, it's like yield 100.
So Thomas's memory lives in Nathaniel Hawthorne's short story, The Maypole of Merrymount, which centers on a newlywed couple who dance merrily around a maypole that is later cut down by the Puritans. A new edition of Thomas's book was released by a Boston publisher in 1883, so like 200 years later, with an introduction and notes written by a descendant of both John Adams and John Quincy Adams, who went by the name of Charles Francis Adams Jr. So by taking away all of the political context, the book gained new life as a sort of scientific guidebook on early New
Yeah,
England.
as it should have been. That's how it should have been interpreted, but there was too much ishiness with the political and religious landscape.
New English canon had another revival in the 20th century when it became a symbol of anti-Puritanism and anti-authoritarianism. In the 1960s and 70s, it became popular in literary circles during the counterculture movement, which I did not know.
That makes sense, though, as to why a lot of them were similar and a lot of the themes are similar.
And in October of 2019, a first edition copy of New English Canon was sold for $60,000 at Christie's.
Wow.
And today, Marymount is now a residential area in Quincy, Massachusetts, and less than 25 original copies of New English Canon still survive today.
Which is really impressive on its own, because
Yep.
as we know, we love burning a good book in
Yep.
history. We really love burning them.
So yeah, that is the story of Thomas Morton, Marymount, and the New English Canon.
Could you imagine if, like, the U.S. actually was colonized like that?
A lot of things would be different.
Potentially. I feel like the pendulum always swings. Like, there would
Yeah.
still be, like, parallels throughout history, but being snuffed out so fast.
I feel like it wasn't so much about the revelries. I think the big sticking point and like the craw in their sides was the trade with the native peoples, because
Well, they weren't
they were
playing by
getting
their established rules, and they were giving their enemies weapons. Like, not enemies to them, but the Puritans.
not only that, but they were doing much better in the fur trade than the Puritans were, because
Mhm.
they were actually being kind to the people they were
Mhm.
trading with and
Yeah,
treating them fairly, like partners and like equals. And that was not what the Puritans were doing. And they were getting pissed that they were doing much better
because they didn't wanna do it. Yeah.
financially than they were. And so, like, we got to
Yeah.
shut this shit down. Like,
Mhm.
no. So I think that was a lot of it too. And not so much they're this hippy dippy colony. It was more about the money. I
Mhm.
think it was
I
about
think you
greed.
can greed in kind of every sense of the word too. I mean, those governors and stuff, they wanted to be the only ones that were doling out the rules.
Yeah.
I'm really surprised he, like, lived as well and as long as he did.
We'd love to hear from you, and there's a couple of ways you can reach out to us. You can email us at yeoldecrimepodcast@gmail.com, where you can send us story ideas, share any spooky stories you may have, fun gifts, or even just to say hello.
You can also reach out to us via snail mail. Remember mail? Our mailing address is Ye Olde Crime Podcast, P.O. Box 341, Wyoming, Minnesota 55092. Fun fact, we like to send out thank you cards with fun stickers you can't get at our shop, so it's worth the cost of a stamp.
Autumn's Oddities is a strange and unusual podcast made by The Strange and Unusual, me, Autumn Gruby. Each week, I'll be taking you through some of the creepiest cases true crime has to offer. It won't only be true crime, I'll also be covering cryptids, haunted places, haunted things, and the true stories that inspired horror movies. Listen every Monday and Friday for new episodes. And remember, if it's creepy and weird, you'll find it here.
And this week's podcast plug is the Autumn's Oddities podcast. If it's creepy and weird, you'll find it here. This is a podcast for the strange and unusual, made by the strange and unusual. Autumn has been a guest on the show for one of our Cramport segments.
Mhm.
She is part of the Darkcast Network, and we will have a link to her show in the show notes.
Nice.
And Carrie Ann would like to know, would you rather wake up and be in a murder mystery film where you could be killed, or wake up as part of a Stephen King book?
Murder mystery. I don't know. I'm not, this is going to sound really messed up, but I'm not as afraid of death. I don't think in like the same way.
Mm.
It would be nice to like know how I died.
Mhm.
Like maybe less stabby and just like a slit. I don't know. But
Yeah.
I think the interactivity would be more fun than a Stephen King novel because I think this is going to sound really dark too, but I think I would rather kill myself being stuck in a Stephen King novel than,
It's fair.
you know, like at least I have some chance of surviving and being happy,
Yeah.
choosing my own venture in a way. I don't know if happiness exists in Stephen King novels long term.
Probably
You're
not.
really not supposed to. It's not allowed.
Yeah. I'll take Stephen King just because,
Yeah.
who knows? Maybe I would be Carrie. Maybe I am
There you go.
Carrie and I can burn down my enemies, and who doesn't love being covered in pig's blood? I mean, I don't.
There you go.
I don't ever want to, but
Knowing my luck, I would just die of diabetes in my sleep, and they would start that as like there's a killer among us.
you're resurrected. They bury you in the pet cemetery and you're resurrected.
And I'm like, I didn't
Yeah.
want to be in this one.
Why are you doing this to me?
Why did I get both?
God damn it. If you would like to ask us a question, you can hit us up on our DMs or email us. You know, just let us know what you want to know.
Yeah.
If you love the show, the best way to support us is to leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Good Pods, CastBox, Podcast Addict, and or Audible. Links to all of these are in our show notes, or if you're already listening on one of these platforms, you know what to do.
Oh, and while you're at it, shoot us a question you'd like to hear us answer on the pod. We'll give you a special shout out and address your burning questions all at the same time. The weirder, the better. Submit them via link in our show notes or shoot them to us in our DMs.
On that note, what's something good you'd like to share?
I don't have anything super crazy that's like really good, but I think the good thing this week is that there's nothing catastrophically bad.
That's fair.
You know, like
Mm-hmm.
things are good. Work is good. Home is good. We're trying really hard to not get sick, and we haven't gotten sick. So it's like
Which is
that
also
kind
good.
of that skirting of just like not necessarily an abundance of good news, but also there's no bad news. So it's just a positive existing, trying to get a little more sleep, that kind of a thing.
I gotcha.
We're just kind of coasting, and I think that can be my good news for this week because I don't have anything stark, but I also don't have anything bad. And as like we both had pretty rough summers.
Yeah.
That like I'm just kind of enjoying the quiet.
That's fair.
How about you?
We have been doing more yard work. We were outside a few times over the weekend.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it was gorgeous too. It was a nice
It was really
weekend.
nice out. Yeah. We had Kona in the back with us.
Nice.
Did a lot of burning of brush and leaves. We did a decent amount of yard work, like mulching leaves and stuff. There's still a lot that needs to get done. It may or may not get done before the first staying snow hits, but we got a good chunk done.
Nice.
And it's just nice sitting next to the fire pit, admiring a fire that you were able to put together.
Yeah, and relaxing after exhausting yourself, getting all the
Mhm.
kindling.
So it was nice.
That's awesome.
I'll have that. I'll have that be my something good.
That is a good thing. Oh, and I love that smell too.
Yeah, I love the smell of bonfires.
Like bonfires.
All right, shall we?
Let's do it.
Want to be social with us? You can see pics from this week's episode, bonus content, and funny memes on X at Ye Olde Crime Pod, or on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and YouTube at Ye Olde Crime Podcast.
Speaking of YouTube, we have a special playlist just for our Can You Crack the Cramp Word segments with our guest podcasters to see who can correctly guess the meaning of some obscure Victorian slang terms. If that's your thing, check it out.
And on that note, as always, I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Madison.
And we'll see you next time with another tale
As old as crime.